Hello there, I'm Mark Griffiths from Wrexham AFC, and it's time for your weekly dose of AskWxm questions. Remember, AskWxm is the hashtag that keeps on giving, and you can use it to get in touch with us on Twitter or Blue Sky. And during the matches, or in this podcast, we'll do our best to answer your questions. Right, we got some good ones this week, so let's crack on straight away with this from Chip Pate. And it goes back to the game at Shrewsbury. If you remember, there was a line outside the pitch, out along the side of the pitch. The pitch appeared to have been narrowed. So Chip says, the mysterious extra touchline at Shrewsbury Town makes me wonder. Other than the inevitable public shaming, is there anything keeping the club from changing their pitch dimensions routinely from match to match? It's a great question, and it's one that I had to really look into quite a bit to try and find a definitive answer. I think, found a definitive answer, but firstly, let's just have a little look through the sort of glorious history of pitch tampering, the great one, and there's a wonderful video, I'll put a link in the description, is Rangers, when Graeme Souness was their manager in the 90s, playing Dynamo Kiev, who were an exceptionally well-drilled team. Their manager, Valery Lobanovsky, is one of the all-time managerial greats, and he apparently prepared his team by computer. He'd had all these, even in those days, computer systems, and going back way before then, which he would use to calculate different formations and patterns of play, which he would then drill into his players. I guess the thinking perhaps is that if you disrupt that a little bit, the whole thing could go wrong. So Souness let Kiev train the day before on Rangers pitch. Well, I say let. That's the rule. If you're in the UEFA competition, you have to be allowed at least an hour on the pitch that the game will be played on the day before. And then after they'd done that, he narrowed the pitch considerably. And if you look on that video clip I mentioned, you'll see him standing on the original touchline. And the actual touchline for the game is way behind him. Kiev won the first game 1-0. Rangers won the second leg 2-0 and went through. So you might argue it worked, although if you look at the goals, the first one's an astounding mistake by the goalkeeper who has the ball in his hands, bounces it, and a player nicks in and knocks it away from him while the ball's on its way down. It's a crazy, crazy thing. That had nothing to do with the width of the pitch. But yeah, teams do it. We'll talk about why in a second as well. Marcelo Bielsa, the mad genius who took Leeds up, who created the most wonderful, briefly sparking Athletic Bilbao team that Andoni Iraola was part of, and now as manager of Bournemouth he's clearly taken some of Bielsa's ideas. He was famously really obsessive, and apparently when he was managing in South America would, before the match when they arrived, he'd go straight on the pitch and he'd pace out the opposing pitch to check that it was actually the same dimensions that he'd that officially it had been reported as. So, yeah, pitch dimensions can be important. Why would you do it? Why would you change it? Oh, sorry, Chip's question was, can you, apart from the obvious shaming, just change it from one match to another? Yes. Basically, yes, you can do it if you want to. There are rules which we'll come to in just a second, but there's no hard and fast rule for the size of a football pitch. There are only maximum and minimum dimensions. So within that, well, as you'll see here, you've got quite a lot of play. And you could do if you wanted to. Although I've got to say, surely teams ought to have an overall strategy, and changing from one to another game to stymie your opponents, I'd argue probably would be getting too obsessed with your opposition and not focusing as much on your approach and your strengths. But anyway, let's have a look at the actual regulations, because they say, firstly, now this is a beauty. According to the rules, the overall rule is the touchline must be longer than the goal line, but you could, within that, almost have a square pitch, because the length of the pitch, the touchline, is a minimum of 100 yards and a maximum of 130 yards. Likewise, the width, which is the length of the goal line, minimum of 50 yards, maximum of 100. So obviously, if you take the minimum length of the touchline and the maximum length of the goal line, you've got a square pitch of 100 metres. That doesn't happen in real football, proper football. Really, the amount of play in those regulations are to recognise the fact that, amateur football might be played on whatever pitch you can muster. You find a little patch of grass, it's pretty much square, but we can play on it. So that's more for that reason. As long as it's longer than it's wide, that extra length could be a minimal amount. In actual proper competitive football, you're more likely to see them following these dimensions for international matches, which give you less room for manoeuvre. Essentially, you can have, the length of the pitch goes down from between 100 and 130 to between 100 and 120, so you've got 10 yards less to play with there. And then from side to side, the width of the pitch, now this is a substantial difference. It goes from 50 to 100 yards. It narrows down considerably to 70 to 80 yards. So you've got less room for manoeuvre. If you're actually a professional team, you should be expected to be complying rather more with that rectangular shape. But there's still room for manoeuvre there, isn't there? And I'll show you why. If you're listening to this rather than watching, I'm sorry, I'll try and be descriptive. I've got some screenshots from the Wrexham Stevenage game from the second half, when Stevenage, who are a very good defensive team, are looking to defend and we're putting pressure on them. And the first screenshot shows us with the ball on the halfway line, and I want to focus on the Stevenage defenders. So they've got the back four and also one of the midfielders who's dropped in with them. They've got a line of 5 players just outside the box. The more crowded it is, the better as far as they're concerned. So in terms of length of the pitch, which I'm not going to focus on too much, I'm more focused on the width, but just think about length. They're trying to not drop back into a penalty area until they absolutely have to. They want to hold a high line, make it crowded so it's difficult for Wrexham to pass the ball through the middle of the pitch, and they want to stay out the box as much as they can. Obviously, if that pitch, just think of that difference you can have. If it's 10 yards shorter, they can really congest things an awful lot more. If they hold a line 5 yards outside the penalty area, they can really make it crowded in that half, and that would help them. But that's all I want to say about the length of the pitch. I want us to focus on width, because the other thing about them, you've got 5 players in defensive positions, and they're all within the width of the penalty area. They're trying to defend narrow so that there's no room in the middle of the pitch. Wrexham can't pass their way through. Wrexham, it's clear what they're going to look to do. We've got McLean on the ball on the left-hand side in the halfway line. We've got Longman outside on the right, and he's in space. The space, as Andy Morrell was saying in the commentary, the space is on the flanks. Stevenage defend narrow. We've got to try and stretch them out. So it might help Stevenage in this situation, if they were the home team, to have a narrower pitch, because there's less of a distance between Longman, who's going to be the target of the ball, and their left-back, Freestone, and they'll be able to keep that defensive unit close to each other while Freestone's still close enough to Longman to make that diagonal pass difficult. I hope that makes sense. Here's another picture of their setup where it's gone wrong, or potentially has, because Freestone has come across. He has to, because the ball's been moved to the right-hand side. So he's come across to cover Longman. He's gone wider than the penalty area. And then now there's quite a big gap between him and the left-sided centre-back. And that's something Wrexham could look to exploit, isn't it? If we can get a midfield player running into that gap, we can disrupt them and get into their penalty area more easily than certainly they would hope. And in the next picture, you can see how a Stevenage player covers this. So Freestone has again gone wide to cover Longman, because the ball's on Longman's side of the pitch. One of the midfielders has dropped in and filled that gap between the centre-back and the full-back. He's not fully committed himself, because any player who's going to go in behind him, who's his responsibility, is currently in front of him, so he can keep an eye on them and watch out for runs. But I hope you can see there the idea of keeping your defence narrow makes it more difficult to play through the middle, and therefore the narrower the pitch, the more it's going to suit a side defending like that. Now then, a different instance here from the same game. We've got Tom O'Connor on the ball, left of centre, in Wrexham's half. Again, that diagonal is on for Longman on the right, although the Stevenage defence on this occasion have got closer, so there'll be a more difficult pass that O'Connor's going to have to try and play, because Freestone is able to get closer to Longman. But if you pull this blanket over your head, you're going to leave your feet cold. So if you look at the very bottom of the screen, you can see crafty old James McLean is waiting, and he's got so much space there. Now, firstly, just envisage this with the pitch narrower on both sides. Can you see how the distances are better for Stevenage? And I talk about this sometimes in commentary about the distances look good. You know, a team looks compact. Stevenage, it'd be much easier for them to be close to each other, and all football teams work on a system. All football teams work on the idea of little partnerships all over the pitch. You know, those players are closer together, so they can come and help each other quicker if that pitch is narrower. As it is, clearly McLean has got a lot of room. Now, O'Connor doesn't choose to use McLean, and here's why. When you go to the next one, he does execute the diagonal. Longman goes off and gets it by the corner flag. Naturally, Stevenage have to drop deeper now. And naturally, they have to shuffle across a bit to fill the gaps. Freestone's got to go across the Longman and stop him just having all the time in the world to cross it. So they're all going to have to shuffle across. Like I said, the wider the pitch, the tougher it is for them to successfully do that without leaving gaps. And if you, again, look at the near sides of the pitch, Mr. McLean has crept up unmarked. Nobody has noticed. And he's got like the far post, that third of the penalty area, maybe almost half the penalty area, all to himself. So do you see what I mean? Freeman, the number 7, is playing at right back. If the pitch is narrower, imagine it, he's got much more scope to be able to at least keep an eye on McLean. At the moment, as you can see, he's picking up Fletcher. But he'd be able to maybe have an eye on him, or maybe call in one of the other players to step across. But at the moment, it's 2 marking 2 in the middle, because they are stretched out a bit more. And when the ball comes in, it's actually a cross which the keeper takes. But when the ball comes in, you can see the value of McLean getting up there, because he's completely unmarked. If it's a long cross to the far post, Fletcher actually is also on the blind side of Freeman. If a better cross had come in, Stevenage might have been punished. But again, like I said, the point is, imagine that pitch narrower at both sides. It's much more easy for Stevenage to be one tight, solid defensive unit. I hope I've explained that clearly enough. Now, Tim K, other than Rex, what or who is your favourite mascot that you have encountered? Happy days. Well, let's take a deep dive into this. How about Boiler Man? West Bromwich Albion got sponsored by a company that make boilers and unleashed Boiler Man onto the world. The boxiest mascot of all time. Essentially a person in a boiler. Or Groqueta. Now, I don't know, Groqueta's Catalan for frogs, I believe. No, actually, am I getting this wrong? Maybe I'm not. But it's Villarreal, the Spanish team from Castellon, just close to Valencia. And Villarreal are a side who nicknamed themselves with their yellow shirts the Yellow Submarine. And so remarkably, their mascot is a submarine. Essentially, his head is a submarine with a really dinky little red periscope coming out of his light blue head. That's a weird one, isn't it? That's a beauty. I think anyone who's looking at this knows exactly what's going on here. We're playing at Wigan next season, and their mascot is in great danger from me, because Wigan is known for their pies, and their mascot is a pie. Again, apologies if you're just listening to this, but what a sight that is a living pie, a massive pie, a pie that I must go for. Well, of course, first I've got to get through my battle with Port Vale's mascot next week. Of course, the battery in the potteries, as the boxing press are calling it. I've got issues of K9, and I will bring them to a conclusion one way or the other next Tuesday. Super Pepino is the mascot of Leganés, another Spanish team. It's on a team on the suburbs of Madrid, and they specialise in growing pickles and cucumbers. So Super Pepino is a human version of that, with a mask, because he's a superhero, of course. Leganés is a great little club. And yeah, Super Pepino. It sort of sums up their slightly quirky nature. Now, Hartlepool United have one of the great mascot origin stories. Hangus. Angus with an H apostrophe at the front. And this is a beauty. The story goes that during the Napoleonic Wars, a ship wrecked off the coast of Hartlepool. It's a coastal maritime town. And a monkey washed up onto the beach from the ship. Supposedly, I mean, this may not be true, let's be honest here. A circus bringing a monkey in or something like that. This poor thing ends up on the beach. Well, no. I haven't seen a beach at Hartlepool. Ends up in Hartlepool somehow. And the naive Hartlepool folk have never seen anything like a monkey before, but they've never seen people from other countries before. And so they see this tiny little hairy man who is making noises, but they can't understand it, and they think he must be a French spy. This must be a Frenchman. This must be what Frenchmen look like. And so they put the poor monkey on trial for being a spy, find it guilty, and hang the monkey. I do hope that's not true. But it is local folklore up there, and so their mascot, Hangus the monkey. Yeah? Really good taste, isn't it, everybody? And there's more to this. I mean, it is a witty kind of thing, even though it's a bit depressing for animal lovers like me. The thing is that they became, in like sort of 80s, 90s, it became a bit of a story. You know, people started to realise this, and it became a national story of a curiosity, to the extent that the man inside the mascot was voted mayor of Hartlepool, believe it or not. So, yep, Hangus is an important civic figure as well as a mascot. The ultimate, perhaps, is Partick Thistle's mascot, Kingsley. Now, if you are not watching this, you need to Google him. Kingsley is the mascot from your nightmares. He's all yellow. His head is a massive, and I mean massive, even by mascot standards, spiky sun. And his face is the most terrifying, screaming. It's like Munch, but much more disturbing. It is conscious, this. Partick Thistle asked an artist to embody the sensation of being a football fan, and this is what he came up with. And it's sort of, you know, people of a sort of sunny disposition. You're always hopeful when you're a football fan that something great's going to happen, but you're also consumed by anger and pain. And so the facial expression depicts the less positive side of it, while the sun is the positive side. It's macabre, I think is the best way to describe it. My all-time non-Wrexham mascot, though, is a living thing. Hennes is the mascot of Köln, a German football team. In Britain, in English, we call it Cologne, of course. They're a great historic club, and their mascot, their badge is 1FC, 1 Fußball Club Köln, logo with a goat standing on it. And Hennes is the GOAT. We are on to, I may not have kept up with this, I think we're on to Hennes the 12th, because obviously Hennesses get retired as they get old, but it is a genuine GOAT. It's got the full, cool, curvy horns going on. He is at every match. There was a weird instance about 10 years ago where a Curran player scored and Hennis is at the sides of the pitch and he got carried away and he ran across and he grabbed Hennis by the horns and lifted him up, thinking this is a fun celebration. Well, it's not a fun celebration. It's abusing a goat. And, delighted as the fans were that Curran had scored, the atmosphere turned quickly because you don't mess around with Hennis. He's our mascot. And the player had to do a massive apologetic round of the media afterwards to say, I'm really sorry I got carried away. That was really stupid. I love Hennis. I won't do that again. So Hennis is my favourite, I think. My favourite non-Wrexham one, because, of course, before Rex, there was the legendary Rockin Robin. And, again, the picture I'm sure on screen is Robin in his greatest moment. A boring match. I'm pretty sure it was Cambridge. I feel like it was. Nothing is happening. It's so dull. It's a hot day, end of the season. There's nothing riding on it either. And then, well, riding on it's an ironic phrase, because suddenly, out of nowhere, Rockin Robin, who always had, shall we say, a mischievous demeanour, appears out of nowhere, riding a bike down the side of the pitch. It was glorious. It's one of the great moments of 1990s Wrexham fandom. Utterly iconic, utterly brilliant. It was just so funny. I always thought that Robin used to get away with maybe a little bit more than you'd expect, and I couldn't help wonder if tucked away in North East Wales, people just didn't bother that much at what we did. I remember Preston, their ground is called Deepdale, and their mascot used to be, I don't know if it still is, the Deepdale Duck. And we like alliteration with our mascots. And I remember him getting fined because he was in front of the opposing fans, making gestures at them. But Rockin Robin always did that. Every game, Rockin Robin would bend over and essentially twerk at the away fans and make all sorts of gestures. He never got into trouble. Rockin Robin was a rebel. He was wonderful. And he got retired in a way which I didn't like. Don't get me wrong. A new commercial manager came in, and this is a long time ago, and said we should change our nickname to the Red Dragons because it's better for, taking advantage commercially of our Welsh identity. I'm not disagreeing with that. The thing is, he did one of those sort of fixed polls where, the question was, do you want to move forward and make millions for the club by having a dragon as our mascot, or do you want to continue living in the past with no money with Rockin Robin? That sort of question. So, of course, people voted for the dragon. Rockin Robin was killed off, and we didn't even have a dragon mascot for months afterwards. We had a lot of unsold Rockin Robin merchandise in the shop. I mean, it was just stupid. And frankly, the club didn't take advantage. That commercial manager didn't take advantage of the whole dragon link at all. Frankly, I would argue that really it was only the trust, to be fair, when they ran the club started to get it going a bit, and it was really the Robin Ryan who have fully exploited that. So, I'm not saying it wasn't a smart idea, but Rockin Robin was a cult legend and was killed off. Now, when we had our 150th anniversary game in 2014, we planned a big occasion for the anniversary match against Grimsby, and fair play, our media manager at the time, Carl Hogan, did a superb job and was able to track down one of the Rockin Robin outfits who was up in somebody's loft, in a really poor state of repair. And his wife Gemma got to work on it and managed to bring him back to his former glory. So we do have the Rockin Robin outfit now as well, and we had all sorts of fun on that anniversary match with Robin going around the crowd, having races with Rex. It was great fun. We filmed a promotional video as well with the two of them taking penalties at each other. I was Robin, and all I can say is I have no idea how the person in Rockin Robin rode a bike, because the feet are crazy. They're massive and wide. I don't see how they wouldn't get caught in the spokes. and the head, you can't see out of it. You're looking through the mouth, you can't see out of it at all. Impossible. So how that person managed to ride a bike down the side of the pitch, I have no idea. But there you go. I think Rockin Robin's got to be my favourite, with Hennis as my favourite non-Wrexham one, if that's a fair answer. Oh, by the way, I was in goal as Rockin Robin. I couldn't see a thing. I was supposed to try and save a shot. The shot came in. I couldn't see a thing. I could only hear the contact of foot on ball. But I saved it. I just stuck my hand out and saved it, which shows that I am the Shaolin monk of goalkeeping. Come on, Mark Howard, get me on your podcast. Right, let's move on. But also, still about birds. Ruby Slippers says, watching a bird fly over the pitch makes you wonder about what happens if droppings land on a player. They get bird muck on them, I'm afraid, is it. To be honest with you. I wouldn't have been pleased as Cardiff Met were wasting time at the end of the women's game last Sunday if one of them had gone down and demanded a physio because there was some bird muck on in her eye. Put it that way. Although the rest still wouldn't have added the time on, Ruddy. Sorry, I'm bitter. Do I have any memorable stories of animals on the pitch, though? Now. Yes. I remember, about 15 years ago, Jack Russell appeared from nowhere and just ran around on Wrexham's pitch. That was good fun. It was just a dog running around on the pitch having a great time, but everybody enjoys themselves. Everybody does enjoy themselves when an animal gets on the pitch, don't they? I think I probably said the story, this is a cricket one, but you said a pitch, didn't say a football pitch. England in 1982 playing in Australia, always the feisty fixture, the big rivalry. The Australians, of course, have got, how shall we put this, a less than subtle sense of humour. And I'm not knocking that. I share that trait. And so England had two players who were a bit on the portly side. Ian Botham, who's an all-time legend for England, and Eddie Hemmings, an Australian fan, wait for it, tranquilised a pig, I think a piglet to be fair, put it in a cool box, an esky, as they call them in Australia, an Eskimo, an esky. When the security people were checking as he went in, he said, he's put an apple in the poor thing's mouth. Oh yeah, it's a pig on a spit roasted pig. Gonna eat the thing. So they go in. Of course, they then revive the pig, throw him on the pitch. He's got Eddie written on one side and Botham on the other, and this poor disorientated piglet is walking around with these two chubby England players' names on him. That was memorable. They seem to see the funny side. Football, well, there is one very famous YouTube clip, which actually isn't as funny as it looks, of an old game in the 60s, old black and white footage of an FA Cup match, and the ball goes through to a goalkeeper. A dog has got on the pitch, and he runs up, and he bites the goalkeeper. That's as often shown, and people think it's hilarious. The goalkeeper had to retire because of the injury. It's not as funny as it looks. The dog, I'm afraid, jumps up and bites him between the legs, and it's a serious injury that he got. So you may see that, but you can be a killjoy. You have my permission to say to people, that's not amusing, that's awful. And then also, I just remembered that I can put myself on the screen. I've just been enjoying reading tweets. Okay, I'll put them back on. There's also there was a story of I don't know if Jimmy Greaves, legendary England, Tottenham, West Ham striker, went to Italy for a bit as well. And a dog got onto the pitch and urinated on him. And hang on a second. Am I getting this the wrong way round? That the Brazil won, and the chairman of a Brazilian team was at the game, and he thought it's good luck if that dog runs on the pitch and urinates on somebody, my team wins. And so he took it was a stray dog, he took the dog in and adopted the dog, but brilliantly, or not, depending on whether you support that team, he used to take the dog to every game, and if his team needed a break, maybe they were winning and under a lot of pressure, he would release the dog onto the pitch. The ref would have to stop the match, and then his team would get a chance to regroup and have a breather. So a tactical dog there. That's back in the 60s, by the way. But it's quite something now, isn't it? Leo, now these are the start of a few questions about our strikers. Leo said, I've really been missing Marriott, so happy to see him back and taking shots, despite what seems to is going to be, this is during the Stevenage match, our first home loss since the Middle Ages. Yes, you're quite right. It was our first home loss, I think, since Clovis was king of the Franks. I think I'm right in saying. Yeah, it was certainly sometime during the Merovingian dynasty. Anyway, yes, I'm delighted to see Marriott back. I mean, I think we've got to remember, we have had trouble turning, pressure into goals. But we did lose Marriott to injury when he was on fire. And it's great to see that the two substitute cameos he's had so far, he's looked very sharp, hasn't he? He's been getting in the box, he's been pinning defenders, he's been getting shots off. He looks sharp, and that's good news, isn't it? Sometimes it takes a while for players to get back into the swing of things. But Marriott looks like he's knocking on the door to start at Crawley, to be honest. He looks very, very sharp indeed. So that's good news. Gareth asks, did we make a terrible mistake? 4 appearances for Burton, 4 goals for Jon Daddy Bodvarsson. Right. I don't think we did. But obviously, I need to add a caveat to that. Bodvarsson's a good player, and I liked him, and he seemed like a good bloke as well. And he worked extremely hard, but if you think back to our games, for whatever reason, he didn't really look like he was going to score, did he? He had that chance on his debut at Harrogate, which the keeper saved. Like I say, put in a really good shift, but he wasn't really looking that threatening. To be fair to him, that's his first football of the season. It's understandable that he wasn't quite so sharp, and maybe we've just got him ready for Burton. But then Burton are aiming to play around him. He's their main spearhead. They're obviously serving him differently. And yeah, he's clicked, but I don't think it means that he would be banging goals in for us, personally. And in fact, if you want to look at it this way, people are clamouring for a transfer window signing up front. Well, if that slot was filled by keeping Bodvarsson, would you be thinking, well, that's a good move, that's the boost we need to win the title, or well, to go up? I don't think we would be thinking that. So no, I think it's just a circumstance. He's a good player, and moving to a different club and a different environment and a different style of play was what he needed, really. I'm glad for him, and I hope that apart from when he plays against us, that continues for him. Leo again, actually. Can we stop with a one-striker formation already? It worked wonderfully for Exeter, but we haven't been playing well ever since, to be honest. I don't totally agree. I agree that there have been times when that formation hasn't worked. We go into this in detail, actually, in this week's Final Whistle Weekly, if you want to have a look at it. But I would argue we actually won, was it 4 of the first 5 games that we tried this? And the exception was Bristol Rovers, where Lee was terrific in that role, scored, and then got injured after half an hour and went off, and we had to abandon that shape. I think it's perfectly legitimate, but the last couple of games, it hasn't worked very well because I feel we need to get bodies into the opposing half, and that sounds a bit simplistic. We need to get players around Palmer, around Lee, so that Lee can drop off and make space, and then there's that space there can be filled with a player running in beyond Palmer and taking advantage of it. A bit like that space I showed earlier in the Stevenage defence. Can we create that gap and then run someone into it before it gets covered? Lee takes a man with him, and then that's the point you look to strike. Stevenage themselves did that very well, actually. Reed up front and Apere were not fixed points. They weren't staying in the middle. They were moving about, trying to drag our defenders about. And when it worked and there was a gap, that was clearly a trigger for players to pour into that gap, and then Stevenage would try and play it in early to them. So I think it can work, but it hasn't in the last couple of matches. Maybe teams have got a little wise to it. Plus, if they press well in our half, it's difficult for us to get that control of the ball in the opposition half. And when you start going long and you're playing of one up front and one off, you've got a problem, because the player can win as many headers as he wants, but that player who's off is deep and can't get close enough. So it hasn't worked well, I don't think, the last couple of games. I don't think that it's a bad idea, but it hasn't worked well. Like all ideas, you need to make them effective, don't you? Okay, Kurt Bennett. Similar points. Getting really tired of long, inaccurate passes. Need a lot of work on maintaining possession. I mean, yeah, I think that the issue is that we needed to back ourselves and maintain possession. When Stevenage, in particular, were very good. The pressure they put on us in our half. And maybe someone just had to be brave and try to pass, make a difficult pass, or just hold on to the ball under pressure. But we needed to draw them onto us, I guess, which has risk, I accept. Be calm and pass our way through, and then once we've opened it up, once we've got past their press, they've got problems, and we can strike, or we can sit in their half and force them to defend deep. And although they're a very good defensive team, as you could see in the second half, when they did have to defend in their own half a lot more, we were able to make chances. So, yeah, I agree. Or if not, it's got to be that we have a player like Marriott, like Mullin, able to work off the player who's receiving the long ball. But yeah, when you're playing one up and one off, it's definitely not optimal to be playing it long, is it? And then another one, nevertheless, suggests, this is from the Shrewsbury game, I think, if I remember correctly, after that. Super Paul Mullin and Palmer up front, and then a fresh Fletcher in the second half is better for us than 98 minutes of Fletcher, because remember he played the full game at Shrewsbury. Debate me. And Carl Embo does, saying Palmer works his socks off all round the pitch, but the way Fletcher can bring the ball down and play it, plus his aerial threat, is far superior. I do wonder how he doesn't get his shirt pulled the way Palmer does. Maybe 45 of Marriott and Fletcher and 45 Mullin and Palmer. And nevertheless suggests that's fine as long as Mullin and Palmer go first. It's an interesting debate, isn't it? One thing Palmer does do, as Carl says, is work his absolute socks off. And that does have the effect of grinding defenders down, which can only help Fletcher, because those defenders have been taking a battering for 60, 65 minutes. And then a fresh, mobile, talented big man like Fletcher comes on, and he can start to exploit that, perhaps, and make them vulnerable. So that's one element of it. And I think that's a big part of why Palmer tends to be the one who starts rather than Fletcher. Obviously, Fletcher may not have 90 minutes in him anyway because of his knee, so that's also a factor. And I think Parkinson, who he said in the first series of Welcome to Wrexham, he likes that big small combination, and Palmer's a different type of striker to Fletcher. I wouldn't argue that Fletcher grinds people down as much, and maybe that's also why he doesn't get his shirt pulled as much, let's be honest, because Palmer backs in, pins defenders, forcing them to be touch tight right behind him, which means that if he can win the ball or hold her up and bring somebody else in, that defender is kind of stuck there. They can't go off and anticipate the pass or anything like that. So you're pinning him into position. But in doing that, you are inviting shirt pulling. And likewise, Palmer will pull their shirts too. Let's be honest about this. But that's his style. It's the physical battle with the centre-backs and then trying to create loose balls or trying to bring the ball down within that battle. Fletcher, of course, can do that and does do that, and sometimes that necessity has to do that, but he's also a player who will drop off and attack spaces. He is also a player who will look to win ahead, and not by having a physical jostle, although he can do that, but by dropping off and trying to get a run in on the defender, so the defender can't get touch tight to him, and it becomes a duel between two players who are jumping, who can jump better, who can time their jump better. Fletcher's very good at that. Palmer's style, I'm not saying that Palmer can't do that, he can, but I would say Palmer's strength is more his strength, his physicality, his backing in, pinning people and having a battle with them. Whereas Fletcher has got that spring to be able to arrive late and flick the ball on with his head rather than have to use his strength and positioning to win it, if you make sense. It's an interesting debate, isn't it? It's a fascinating debate. And a part of it is also why I want to see that Mullin is credited with the goal, because it clearly is his goal against Stevenage, and we need to get him going, and him scoring goals is going to make him feel better, because if Mullin's banging goals in, I don't think we'll be having this debate, really, and I'm not criticising him in that. I think it'll come, but that's a huge part of our attacking play, isn't it? Now then, moving on to a different subject, Matthew Elif, and I'm hoping we can get something to happen from this. Matthew says, I really wish that the audio description feeds that go into headsets at home and away games in the UK were available online so I could hear it. I'd like to hear what that's like. And JD Lightning says, that's a great call. Maybe they're thinking the video commentary makes it redundant, but I guess it'd be more detailed. Yeah, well, let me have a little chat through some of this. I'm aware of some of the details of it. I don't know whether it's done at all games, actually, but Wrexham certainly do. Now, right, let me walk us back to the beginning, because I was wrong about this about 20 years ago and learned my lesson. We were doing commentaries, and actually it was myself through the Wrexham Supporters Association, not the Trust, the Supporters Association, who set up the first commentary service for visually impaired fans. And the thinking was simple. When I started doing the commentary, we were up on the roof of the derelict old Mould Road stand, where the Macron stand now is. There was a wooden box on the top, which was the commentary box. There was a gentleman who was blind, and he would come up and would just sit in the back of the box and listen. And I found it fascinating. He's a lovely man. And I became friendly with him, and it was really interesting to me. And so when the opportunity arose, the Support Association generously invested in some walkie-talkies, because the logic was a radio broadcast is not live. There's a delay. Anyone who's been watching the streams will know this. So because of that, it's no use sitting in the ground listening to a radio if you can't see the game, because it's not in time. Likewise, I saw Chester used to have a setup where they had a row of headphones behind the commentator, and so visually impaired fans could just go and sit behind the commentator and listen, which was clever and was a solution. And actually, with hindsight, although the idea behind what we tried to do was better, the execution was better by Chester. So maybe I wish we'd just done that. The downside we felt of that was that a person who's visually impaired can't go and watch the match with their mates. They've got to go and sit behind the commentators, and we felt it was better if the fans were able to sit wherever they felt like. So the idea was that obviously a walkie-talkie is instant and live, and that this is before mobile phones, and that if we transmitted on the frequency of the walkie-talkies, the club distributed the walkie-talkies, and fans could listen in the game wherever they wanted to be. It was a smashing idea. Fortunately, the club then was not run by good people, shall we say, and they took on the administration of the headset. So they were the ones who were supposed to be recording who took a headset, organising that, and then collecting them back in. What we didn't know is they weren't doing that. They just put them in a cardboard box, let people take them, and never even attempted to have a system to collect them back in. So we launched the first ever visually impaired commentary at the racecourse, and I was very proud of that until I actually started sniffing around and found out that actually we were doing the broadcast. We were broadcasting it on the frequency, but as far as we could tell, nobody was losing it because all the headsets had gone, all the walkie-talkies. So not thrilled by that. Now afterwards, years afterwards, the Disabled Supporters Association brought up the idea of the audio descriptive commentary. And this is where I was really wrong. At the time, I thought, well, why not just have our commentary? Because it was a radio commentary. It was aimed at people who can't see the game because they're not there. So my logic was, isn't that the same for somebody who is there but can't see the game? I'm glad I lost that argument, because I think I was wrong, if I'm honest with you. I think it is different. I think there is a different level of description. I would say that when I'm commentating, I am conscious of wanting to be as descriptive as possible, which on the streams, people are really nice about the fact they'd like me doing that. I would, if I was just doing a stream and it wasn't also audio, I would talk a lot less. I'd be a lot less descriptive, because if you can see it, you don't need someone to say, oh, I hit the post. But having said that, it's fulfilling both purposes, and therefore I have to be descriptive, so it works as a radio commentary. So apologies if you don't like that, but to be fair, people are really nice about it. But yeah, it's informed me in my radio style that I try to be super descriptive. But having said that, I do appreciate actually that I'm wrong and that the audio description is much, much more detailed and much more maybe aimed at the senses and trying to give that pictorial description more than just a description of the game, if you will. It's a specific skill, and it would be wonderful, wouldn't it, if it could be accessible beyond just within the ground. Oh, by the way, the reason they can do it is that essentially they have very expensive, high-level equipment. I mean, again, the Disabled Sports Association are brilliantly raising the funds for it, and basically, it is a mini radio station. They are transmitting. They're not like us streaming. They are actually sending out radio waves so you can hear it instantaneously within a small area. I can see how there would be scope to send it out, obviously, over the internet. I can also see how there is an obstacle, which is that iFollow are asking people to pay for the audio commentary. And if there was also a free version, even if it's in a slightly different style, I would have thought an awful lot of people would use that instead, and iFollow would not be happy with that because it would cost them money. So I'd imagine that's the reason it's not out there. But it's a shame. That's a shame, isn't it? I'll have to get the guys who do the commentaries to come on the show. I've been talking to them about it actually a while ago, and have a little chat about it and the differences and the challenges and how they got into it. Because it'll be a good story. They're good guys. But yeah, it's a really interesting one. That. Thank you, Matthew, for raising it. The Yarb says, despite playing scrappier and, in my opinion, more aggressively than the men, the women seem to argue with the referees far less. Well, this is something that people do suggest, that women's football, that seems to be a bit, shall we say, more decorum about the behaviour. It's not completely true. I promise you, a few opposition players, I refer you back to the Vellinelli Cup tie, couldn't really get under my skin, if I'm honest. So some players can get very stroppy with the referees. And I sometimes, and this isn't, oh God, I hope this doesn't come across wrongly, but I sometimes worry that some people, and some referees are guilty of this, almost referee women's games a bit more like a friendly and don't realise it's just as serious as the men's football. And I wonder whether, I don't know, whether those two things somehow tie up. But whether or not that is the case, and you're quite right, Yarb, yeah, you don't want to be tackled by Phoebe Davis and Erin Lovett and Karen Allen and all those guys. But having said that, yeah, it is. There seems to be less dissent, certainly, but by the same token, it is most certainly wholehearted and physically taxing. Oh man, I tell you, yeah, there's times when I want to put my shin pads just when I'm commentating on Sundays. To be fair. Ruby Slippers, when it's cold, do keepers put heat packets in their gloves? No. Not that I've ever heard of. I never used to. I've never heard of that. I must admit, I was thinking of the goalkeepers being cold on Tuesday. It was really cold. The last, goodness, December, January's been, even by British standards, cold. And I was thinking, oh, this is a horrible night to be standing there if it's a one-sided game. But I haven't said that. That's life, innit? You just got to, as they say in cycling, there's no such thing as a cold day. It's just if you're not dressed correctly for the conditions. So I think I'd stand with that, really, if I'm honest with you. And Janie Wrexham as well, saying, does a team have to forfeit if they can't get to a game, or is it called off and rescheduled? I'm wondering if there's a hard rule or if it's a ref's courtesy. Right, there will be hard rules within each competition, which may vary. Weirdly, we had a situation like this, didn't we? Was it 2 seasons ago? Scunthorpe got stuck in traffic and arrived late for the game. You get fined. I think it's, I could be wrong here, I think it's an hour and a quarter. I could be wrong. I should look this up. before the kickoff that the away team's got to arrive at the game, or is it an hour and a half, something like that? And you will get fined if you don't turn up on time. By the way, you get fined if you don't come onto the pitch on time as well. So the referee can report you if, you know, what he and the other side are waiting and it's gone past 15 minutes. The ref can report you and you will get fined. So, yeah, the Scunthorpe game, there was a lot of bad traffic on the M62, the main motorway in the north going from west to east, and they were coming along that. For me, that is no excuse. They're a professional team. It's not like they have to wait for people to finish work. It's not like the M62 being busy is a shock. There's always hold-ups. And us going to Halifax, which must be less than half the distance, because sometimes it'd be a nightmare in a midweek game. We always seem to play them in midweek games, and around there it would get snarled up. And you go past on the M62, you're going to go past Manchester, you're going to go past Leeds and Bradford, which is right next to it. You know, you got big cities there that you can get caught up in. So I think Scunthorpe was quite poor. Their fans were all there as well, I must say. It was the team that wasn't. I think it's quite poor that they turned up after the kick-off time, never mind after that cut-off point I was mentioning. We still played the game, and we beat them. And I think that's always got to be the desire, hasn't it, really? You've just got to try and keep in touch with them and hopefully play the game because there's people in the ground. Like I said, they turned up after kick-off time. The crowd was there, including the away fans. You really want to get a game on in that situation. I mean, yeah, if they actually turn tail, then there's going to be a decision here, isn't there? Are we going to punish them? It was a cup match, which doesn't make it possible to just say, right, okay, everyone gets refunds and you're kicked out of the competition. Wrexham have gone through. But the preferable thing is to settle it on the pitch, isn't it? And they were on their way, and so it was settled. Yeah. Bizarre sort of situation. A league game you would assume would have to get played. There is contingency for league games that don't happen. In fact, any game that doesn't happen, the sort of traditional thing is a default 3-0 scoreline to the other side, which, if it's in a league, I suppose it counts towards goal difference, doesn't it? There was a case lately, wasn't there, of a team deliberately getting players to sent off in order to have the game abandoned. You have to have 7 players, and each team must have at least 7 players, and if you drop below that, the game has to be abandoned. Because the goal difference was so bad, and the team essentially were deliberately taking a 3-0 loss rather than the heavier beating they already were suffering. But if you do that, obviously the authorities have the scope to then say, right, you did that deliberately and really lay on a heavy punishment. So, yeah, referee, in reference to the governing body, because that referee in that Wrexham-Scunthorpe game will A, have been trying to get in touch with Scunthorpe as much as possible, and Wrexham were, and B, will also be contacting, what was it? It was an FA Trophy game, so he'd been contacting the FAs, the FA to keep them in touch and keep them informed. But obviously, if you can, you play the game and then they get punished financially. That's what people are going to aim for, isn't it? And, now this is about Port Vale. Speaking of postponements, Todd Lloyd asks, what does, quote, safety concerns for fans around the park mean? Are we talking weather issues? Right, well, in that specific instance, we were, but it was more the conditions already than a promised bad evening of weather. And as I understand it, the safety officer was the person who called her off. Port Vale's safety officer. Every club by law has got to have a safety officer. And the safety officer was suggesting that it wasn't safe around the grounds because it was so snowy and icy for people to come in numbers. And his logic, I understand, was that where the away fans' buses park, you have to walk through land that isn't owned by Port Vale, which is owned by local businesses, because it's like a business park thing. And therefore, those businesses were not going to be happy if a football fan slipped on the snow on their property and then sued them when they had nothing to do with the fixture. Apparently. So, yeah. I mean, there was only been one coach going because it's a Virtue Trophy match. There's not going to be a big crowd. So you might argue it was being a little bit overcautious. But, yeah, that was the decision. And, ooh, that's it. We're done. Right, so that's it. That's Ask Wrexham for this week. I hope I answered your questions effectively. If not, I'm not doing a retake. There will be no replay. I am not Scunthorpe United. I accept the 3-0 loss. Enjoy the rest of your week, chaps, and I'll speak to you soon. Crawley, of course, on Saturday. Let's see if we can get back to winning ways. I'm Mark Griffiths from Wrexham AFC. I was at the start, and I still am now.